Hi, I'm Russ with ESBService.com, and today I wanted to go over a couple of general troubleshooting guidelines to just give you a basic idea of troubleshooting on the tanning bed, and also to help determine what repair video you might need, what troubleshooting video is for you based on the symptom that you're having. So let's say, for instance, the bed won't come on. Usually if your bed won't come on, it's broken into two different categories. One category is where the timer itself appears to be working just fine, but the lamps will not illuminate. Or you have a condition where the bed is just entirely dead and there's no response on the timer. So if you have it where your timer appears to be working just fine, but the bed still just won't come on, usually you have a problem. Then I would look in your backup timer and in your contactor area, and also basically just it could be a general wiring issue. But I guess basically what I'm saying is, if it seems like the timer is okay, then I would first suspect a backup timer or a contactor issue. Now, if your timer itself is just not responding, a digital timer, it has no display, you're hitting the button and there's just nothing going on, or if you have a mechanical timer and you're twisting it and let's say that just nothing is happening, no clicking sound, it doesn't wind down eventually. Well, symptoms like that, I would say it sounds to me like you would probably have a bad timer, but you'll want to diagnose it suspecting that component, the timer itself, as opposed to a backup timer or a contactor. So another problem that you might have is, say the bed is intermittent, but the timer itself seems like it's okay. The bed randomly turns on and off, say, but the timer is still doing what it's doing and it appears normal. Again, this is an issue where I would suspect a backup timer or a contactor as opposed to your main timer. Now, if the bed is intermittently functioning like that, but when it does, the timer itself stops or cuts out, then in that case I would lean more towards the main timer itself being the culprit. So you could have an issue where your mechanical timer is sticking, say. You set the time and then it just doesn't back down. Now, this would be a little more simple to diagnose, because let's say that it could just be on your bezel here. It might be pushed on too far, and it could just be getting hung up on the bezel, or even one of the screws on the timer bracket here. So a simple test would be, also really quick, if your cover isn't positioned exactly center, it might be the flat spot on your stem might be bottoming out on say a hole or an edge or something that would keep it from moving. So in order to test that, what I would do is just take the knob off and see if it's free of anything, and also see if then, like if you go to turn it on and pull it off, if it works just fine. If it works just fine, then obviously the knob is the culprit. And also with the knob off, you can make sure that the timer is center in the cutout of the cover and not hanging up on anything. But if you have it where it continues to do that and there's nothing hanging up on it and the timer won't back down, then the timer itself is bad and would need to be replaced. Lastly, a general issue that you may have would be the circuit breaker tripping. Now, in the last 15 years of my service on ESB Tanning Beds, I've never run into a problem where the circuit breaker tripping was actually due to a failure in the bed. Okay, that's something important to note. The issue comes up a lot though, and it's usually attributed to improper electrical. But we do have an extensive video on amperage and addressing the circuit breaker tripping issue. If you're having that, I would direct you there. So that was a lot about the timer system and issues with the bed basically not coming on, turning off properly, if you will. Now, I'd like to address a few issues that are specifically related to the lamps. Like let's say that you have one lamp out. That could be a lamp issue. You might at that point take the lamp out, like remove the acrylic and take the lamp out and swap it to another spot to see if it lights there or if it doesn't. And that would shed some light on whether the lamp itself is okay or not. Now, if you find that you move it to another spot and it's lighting okay, then that tells you that the lamp is okay, obviously, and there's something wrong with that slot, and you want to start diagnosing that a little bit further. So if that were the case, I would direct you to looking at ballast diagnosing type videos there. Now, if you have one lamp flickering, it's almost the same type of issue. You can have one lamp that's flickering because the lamp itself is starting to go out, or it could be something in that socket. Again, if you switch it to another slot and it's doing the same thing, then obviously it's a problem that's isolated to that lamp. But if you take and you move it to a slot and the problem goes away, then the lamp is lighting just fine in the new slot, that tells you that there's a problem with the original slot. Again, look at the ballast and look at the wiring. Look at maybe the lamp holder. Look at your connections all along the way, but that's where the problem would be coming from. One common question would be, why are there black dots inside of my lamps? And I wouldn't worry about that. That's just simply mercury that's inside the lamps, and that's normal. So let's say that you have two lamps right next to each other that are dim, especially in a 120 volt bed. If that were the case, I would make sure that you do not have, if you have a 10-pin style ballast, that you do not have the jumper cut, because the jumper is only for converting it to 240 volts as opposed to the jumper being intact for 120 volts. If the ballast is proper and still doing that, then I would suspect that the ballast is failed, but I would diagnose the ballast a little bit further. Again, with the two lamps being dim, move them to another slot and see if they're okay in the other slot. Tells you that your lamps are okay. And if you move other fine lamps into the same slot that those two were in and now they are dim, tells you that there's something wrong with that slot. And again, I would start diagnosing your ballast at that point. So let's say that your lamp itself is, you look at the lamp as opposed to the others, and there might be a swirling, a moving around of the gases, it looks like, inside of the lamps. This doesn't happen very often, but sometimes it's more common on newer models. But if you notice that, one thing that I would recommend that you do is simply turn the bed on and off a couple of times and see if that goes away. If that does not go away, then maybe in an extreme case I would take the acrylic out, take the lamp out, and shake it end to end, back and forth a little bit, and then put the lamp back in and see if it goes okay. I haven't seen a problem where the swirling would actually create a problem, but I have seen it go away under those circumstances. If for some reason you had a lamp that was what I would call a violent swirl, if it's swirling greatly, like I said, in a violent kind of way, I would suspect that you might have a problem with that lamp where you need to replace that, but only in an extreme case where it just doesn't go away. Now let's say that all of your lamps are flickering, and you might even hear like a chattering sound, but like all of the lamps in the bed are all turning on and off in a fast pattern like that. When you have a situation like that, what's causing that is your contactor. Your contactor is opening up and closing rapidly. And I'm not saying that that is always the fault of the contactor, but I would start troubleshooting your contactor and your backup timer. That symptom can also be caused by a faulty backup timer. But those are the components that I would look at if all of your lamps are strobing like that. So last question that usually comes up is, can I use aftermarket lamps? Lamps that aren't OEM, original equipment from the manufacturer, such as from ESB, Solara, Synergy, Advantage, all these types of lamps. You certainly could, but in a lot of cases I wouldn't recommend that. And the main reason being, there's so many lamps and so many specifications out there. You would have to make sure that you completely match up all of your specs so you're getting the same performance and you're not doing any harm to your tanning bed. when you go into the tanning bed, there's a warning label that tells you that there's only certain lamps that you can use. When you replace your lamps and you use those same lamps or manufacturer-approved substitutes only, then that would preserve your FDA certification that comes with your tanning bed and should ensure that it gives you the same reliable performance. But if you do prefer, for whatever reason, to use aftermarket lamps, ESBService.com does have a few options of wolf lamps that will work okay with your ESB tanning bed. Otherwise, I would recommend that you keep it original, and you'll have assured yourself of many years of good performance out of your tanning bed.